All my friends at Laughing Place. Here we are at Walt Disney World. The weather is more like California, which I love, and we're actually selling some art here from my ancient history. So probably the first thing to talk about is this piece of the Bird Woman from Mary Poppins. And I loved the film when I was a student in Long Beach State out there in sunny California. And I found that if I painted things that I really loved, it was more inspirational than just doing schoolwork. So I asked if I could do this for a watercolor class, and they agreed, and it was very inspirational for me to do, actually push myself, I think, into medias that I wasn't familiar with doing. And so I didn't know at the time, this would have been a few years after the movie came out, but that this would be a key part of the rest of my life with Disney, because I would go on to meet and become very close friends with Richard and Robert Sherman, especially Richard. And of course, they wrote the music for Mary Poppins. And to know that many years after painting that, I would be hosting Richard for his 85th birthday at my cabin up in near Lake Inlet, that couldn't have happened. That was like not a possibility. So, and then to find out that Walt found this point in the movie to be his favorite point, and he would have Richard and Robert come and sing that, Feed the Birds, very frequently in his office when he was feeling tired and worn out. That was really invigorating for him, to get him positively motivated. So, to have picked up on that when I was a kid in '64, and then paint it a few years later, and then become very closely a working ally with Richard on Journey into Imagination here at EPCOT, and then finally, hosting them as friends in my house. It was a pretty interesting journey from that painting back so many years ago. The other piece here is similar in that the bigger one up here, I was lucky enough to, when I first was hired at Imagineering, to kind of be a mentee under Claude Coates, my mentor at Imagineering. Claude had been, a key player in all the backgrounds in the golden era of Disney animation. So Pinocchio in particular is one of Claude's masterpieces. And so I was there suddenly working with Claude and watching him do background work for the Mickey Mouse Review down here, which was one of the very first shows. Now we call it projection mapping. But back in 1971, Claude did a projection mapping backdrop for the Mickey Mouse Review. So while he was doing that, I said, how would you feel about telling me or taking me through how the process of doing something like that? He goes, well, it's going to be quite a disciplined bit of work. And I said, okay, fine, I'm up for it. Now, I've never done it again because it is an amazingly hard style of work to replicate, and it requires lots and lots of time. And as my career changed, I became more a person telling other people, well, here's what you have to do and all of that. So I stopped doing it altogether. But it's a great opportunity, I think, to look back at when it hung above my desk at Imagineering, and someone came by, I don't know who it was, and said, we're going to have to redo Fantasyland at Disneyland. What about putting Tony on it? He might be, look at what he's done on the wall there, he might be a good person to do that. So I ended up putting it over my desk, and it became a sales piece, I think, for me, in that I got the job to redo Fantasyland. And so then if you look at it, there's a few Easter eggs in it. This is essentially Merlin's Magic Shop, or I don't know what it's called now, the Villain Store in Fantasyland. And I loved that building so much. And then when the movie Tangled came out, there's another cameo of that building in Tangled when Flynn Rider rides the horse out of the city after he's escaped from prison. And you'll see him ride by that building kind of from the other direction. Also, there's the Dwarf's Cottage way over there, and the Disneyland Castle entrance in the middle. And so it wasn't over then, when we were starting Disneyland Paris, I was kind of saying, we've got to do something that complements what we find all over Europe, and particularly in Paris. So I said, what would that be? And to me, fairy tale castles were always high up on a precipice, and that was what made them enchanted. And so I said, is there any way we can do that? And we had all the pushback of, no, you've got to have it meet standards for getting people in wheelchairs and strollers and all that, so it has to be level. And I said, well, Walt never liked that, no, it can't be done thing. So we were able to get the illusion over there of the castle being up on a hill, which I think makes it very distinct. And it also gave us room underneath the cavernous basement to put in a giant dragon in there. And that also makes it not like any other castle in Europe. And I think the whole challenge in Europe of coming up with a project that complemented the classical art of centuries and centuries in Europe and right there in Paris, with something that was, equally valid but in a different way, rather than competing with it. So I think it was helpful in that regard too. So it's got a lot of history outside of the Disney company that helped me with my career, certainly.